In today's show, we continue our season review series. Today's topic, all things Deandre Ayton. We'll look back what he did in his second season in Portland and look ahead and find out what's next and where DA fits into the Trail Blazers' future. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we'll continue our season review series where we're running through every player on the roster and looking back at what they did during the 24-25 season and then looking ahead to what they're going to bring, if they're going to bring it, to the team next season. We'll talk what they did, do a quick season review. We'll visit with Michael from the past, talk best and worst case scenarios, and then we'll spin it forward. Today, we're spinning it forward with Deandre Ayton, talking about the Blazers' big man in the middle. And we'll talk about what DA did this year and where he fits going forward. As he enters the final year of his contract, there are some questions about how, why, what is going on with Deandre Ayton's future. But before we look ahead, let's look back. What did Deandre Ayton do in his second season in Portland? He averaged 14.4 points, 10.2 boards, 1.6 assists to go along with just under a steal a game at 0.8 and 1.0 blocks. Shot 56.6% from the floor, 18.8% from the free throw line, and 66.7% from the free throw line. He averaged 32 minutes a night. He started every game he appeared in. He just missed a big chunk at the end of the season, the final 18 games of the year. Availability was a big deal for Ayton yet again in his second season. It wasn't a mirror image of his first year. I think that would be overstating it, but it was relatively similar. Overall, his efficiency in the end was actually a tad worse than his first season in Portland. Like his true shooting percentage dipped a little bit, and his points per shot attempt, which is a stat that Clean the Glass tracks, was actually a little bit lower. But arguably the same. A lot of that efficiency dip was because he had a weird down year from the free throw line. Like he's a good free throw shooter, generally speaking, like a mid 70s, and has had some years in the 80s. But he's 40 of 60 from the free throw line. Last year he only took 79 in 55 games. This year he took 60 in 40 games. He actually upped his free throw rate a little bit, although last year was the worst free throw rate of his career. This year, second worst. So it's still not back at levels that he had been at a certain point of his career, but 40 of 60 at the free throw line, that's make a third of his threes, or a third of his free throws rather. That hurt his efficiency a little bit. Is an uncharacteristic down year for him. He took threes, not a lot, but certainly more than he had. He finished a clean. He took 32 threes, which was a career high. He besting 24. He took back in the 2022-2023 season. He took 32 threes. He made 6 of them. 32 across 40 games. He's not even taking one a game. It didn't become this big part of his arsenal, which I think some folks were hoping that it might. You're talking about a jump for a guy as deep into his career as he is. Just it's pretty unlikely that he becomes a 5 3-pointer a game type of guy, although he does have good touch from 19 feet. That would be very rare. It would be an historic leap for Ayton. Weirdly, he was 1 of 16 on corner threes. I thought that would be his bread and butter. Not bread and butter. Excuse me. I thought that would be the place where he was effective as a shooter, because I thought they could park him in the corner first, because that's the weak side corner, even the strong side corner with the center is probably the best place to hide him. It does keep the center as the low man, but those centers are much more likely to help in and give you some shots. He's going to pick and pop, so he's going to take some above the break threes. But I thought as an off-ball spacer type, the corner would be a spot. 1 of 16 on corner threes. Obviously, a tiny little sample size, so they just didn't go in. Like I mentioned, he took 32 across 40 games. For context, he took 94 2-pointers between 14 feet and the 3-point line. So from 14 feet out, those are long mid-rangers as tracked by Clean the Glass. He took basically 3 times as many of those long middies as he did threes. That's his shot. That's his comfort shot. He shot about 45% on those on long middies. That's not a diet. That is not an efficient enough diet to make that something you really, really do. You'd have to shoot about 28% from 3 to match that 44%, 45%-ish on long twos. I do think there's a world in which Deandre Ayton can become a 30% three-point shooter, but he wasn't. The rest of his story this year was kind of about injuries. Like I mentioned, he had this slow start, and some of that slow start was he had a deep bruise on his right index finger in November that caused him to miss 7 games. And couple that with just like not playing great to begin the season, his first stretch was pretty rough, quite frankly. Through December 31st, he averaged 14.7 points and 10.4 boards. But he was averaging, more turnovers than assists at 1.8 a game. Turnovers, just 1.5 assists, 1.4 assists. And that was across 23 games. The Blazers were one of the worst defenses in the league during that stretch of the season. So it wasn't like he was helping them on the other end. They were one of the 5 worst defenses in the league pretty much the entire time during that stretch. 15 and 10 is not awful, but Ayton's value is going to come as a scorer for the most part, and he just wasn't doing that. That stretch to begin the season included an infamous benching in the second half of a 42-point home loss to the Jazz, which Chauncey Billups said he did not like Deandre Ayton's spirit. Yikes. And after the way he started his first season in Portland, to start his second season like this as well was like a little bit troubling. And then once he got going, he really got going, and then it ended. He was good, like legitimately good, from January 19th, which is basically when the Blazers season started to look competent. That's game 42 of the year. They win that game. They rip off 10 of 11. Deandre Ayton actually misses 3 of those 11 games with a back injury, but he appeared in 8 of those games during that stretch from January 19th to February 6th, where the Blazers won 10 of 11 games. During that stretch, he averaged 19.4 points, 11.2 rebounds, 2.4 assists, which basically almost nearly doubled his assists for the rest of the year, a steal, and a block. 5 of his 9 20-point games happened during that 8-game stretch. All year long, and in Deandre Ayton's 40 appearances, he cracked the 20-point mark 9 total times, 9 times across 40 games. 5 of them happened during an 8-game stretch in late January to early February. That included a 24-point, 20-rebound game against the Suns in overtime. He had back-to-back really nice games against the Suns, his former team. He also had some stinkers against them in December. Maybe it was just later in the season. Maybe it was just he got rolling. But that was the Blazers' best stretch. They turned into obviously they're beaten up on a soft schedule, but they were a very, very good defensive team during that stretch. They were handling bad teams, and Ayton was playing his best basketball. Then he kind of had a stinker against Minnesota right before the All-Star break, and then the penultimate game before the All-Star break. The Blazers were playing in Denver, and Deandre Ayton hurt his left calf. A non-contact injury when he was going up for a rebound, kind of like, went to load up off that left leg to go up for a rebound and just didn't jump, and it was very clear he was hurt in a way that was like bad news. And he would miss the final 18 games of the season. That was on February 10th. At the time, the Blazers gave him he'd be reevaluated in 4 weeks. They never gave us a medical update. A month later would have been the middle of March. He missed the month beyond that, middle of March. Not surprisingly to anyone who follows the team or the situation, there wouldn't have been much real reason to rush him back for the final 8 games of the season, except that they were sort of kind of chasing the play-in, right? So maybe you could argue that there was, but it always felt like his season was in jeopardy when he got hurt, and then they just think, it was never really in a space where it was real that he was going to come back. So all told, Ayton struggled over his first 23 games, struggled with health, and struggled with and just was in pretty not playing his best basketball by any means. He was back to having one of his worst years of his career, similar to how he'd started his first year in Portland. And then he got rolling right when the team got rolling. He was an incredibly important cog during that stretch. He was playing north of 30 minutes a night. He was hooping. That was when the season changed, and Ayton was a big catalyst for that change. And then he got hurt, and then they kind of kept on keeping on, right? They struggled against some good teams down the stretch, but they continued to take care of business against bad teams. But Ayton didn't play. And now he heads into a summer where he is in the final year of his contract. There was an emergence of the Blazers' young, lottery pick rookie center behind him. And it doesn't mean that Ayton's got to go. They don't need to kick him out the door, but it does add some uncertainty into his position. And before we look forward into some sort of uncertainty, I want to look back. In the second segment, we'll visit from Michael from the past. Where I will play you my best and worst case scenarios that I set back in September. It's a good way to sort of gauge what we thought going into the season was like reasonable expectations for Deandre Ayton, because I think those expectations before the game started help us color how we feel about the performance that actually happened. Join me in that second segment. We'll look back and then we will start looking forward. Join me there. Before we get there, though, I want to tell you that today's program is brought to you by Upwork. Do you need help on a specific project, maybe just a short-term goal that your team has, short-term project that your team wants to finish up? Well, Upwork can find specialized freelancers, marketing, development, design, and more, experts that are ready to help take your business to the next level. So Upwork is super helpful if you just need that flexibility by connecting with top freelance talent across multiple industries, whether that's IT, AI, web development, marketing. So if you just need extra hands for a project, or you're looking for a long-term partner, why not start with Upwork and make hiring simple and affordable? It can be hey, we've got a marketing campaign we got to get out. We'd like to hire this freelancer to help us get that marketing campaign done quickly. And if you like working with someone, it can be a great way to find a candidate that can grow with your business. It's an affordable way to find top-tier freelance help. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Today's program is also brought to you by the good folks over there at Gametime. It's the spot for buying last-minute tickets. Whether you want to go see a playoff game, and maybe you really do, you can go do that. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. And Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. But perhaps you live in Portland. We're not particularly close to any of the playoff games. You can still use Gametime to go to Thorns games, to go to Timbers games, or anything in your area. You could even drive up to Seattle and check out the Mariners if you're into it. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get tickets, even when demand is sky high and prices actually go down on the app the closer you get to the start of your game or match. There's last-minute deals that can save you up to 60%. Plus, they got all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay while you're browsing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. Let's talk Deandre Ayton. What I want to do in this particular program, particular segment, is bring on Michael from the past. Back in September, if you're a new listener, I do my best and worst case scenarios. The best case scenario within reason, the worst case scenario without injury. It's kind of setting the polls for each player based on what I think they'll do this season. And I think it's important to sort of revisit those. One, because it holding me accountable for my takes, but also I think the way we thought about players before the season started helps us kind of color the way we feel about them when the season ends. So let's bring on Michael from the past and talk best and worst case scenarios for Deandre Ayton way back in September. Take it away, Michael from the past. So what's the best case scenario for Deandre Ayton? I think it's pretty simple. It's that he's the guy who finished the season, a guy who's a pretty easy 20-10, someone who really understands where his spots are going to be in the offense, and you can go to and count on efficiently to score efficiently from where he scores from, and to put you 2010 money in the box score. The best case scenario for Deandre Ayton is that there's no ramp up period, there's no feeling out period, there's no getting comfortable. And the best case scenario is that the Blazers, not only do they understand how to use him better after one season in the system, but his teammates understand him better, and just the straight up improvement of Scoot Henderson alone should offer another quality pick and roll partner to make Deandre Ayton the best version of himself. The best version of Deandre Ayton is the guy who played in the final 29 games of the regular season for the Portland Trail Blazers. But I do think there is a world in which the best case scenario is better than what we saw Deandre Ayton be last year. There is a world in which he plays more physical on defense, has a more efficient shot diet, and becomes a better version of himself that was a guy who averaged 20 and 10 on 58% shooting to close the end of last year. So what's the worst case scenario? I don't think it's the Deandre Ayton that was around in December of 2023. I think that's actually lower than the worst case scenario. I don't think there's a worst case scenario which you get a season of 13 and 10 Deandre Ayton. But I do think there is a worst case scenario that Ayton, with the reality that there are more mouths to feed in a young team that kind of has a young players that want to take a step forward. And I think there is the worst case scenario is mostly about Deandre Ayton not feeling comfort in his role. And because he doesn't maybe feel comfort in his role, and because his skill set is reliant on other players setting him up, that he's just worse. And that worse carries over to some of his bad habits, which are not playing with a motor. To me, the worst case scenario is more about, the best case scenario is more about being smarter about what you do. And the worst case scenario is more about, does the mental side of the game, do the soft skills of the game get in the way of what you do well? Thank you, Michael from the past. So it's pretty hard to argue that Deandre Ayton got close to that best case scenario. He was not a 20 and 10 guy. There was not the hyper efficiency we saw. He was pretty similar to who he was last season, which is like a kind of a pretty serious yikes taken on the whole. He was very, very close to the worst case scenario. In fact, Michael from the past, I said right there that I didn't think he would average 13 and 10. Like I thought that the worst case scenario was actually above that. And maybe I was right? He averaged 14 and 10, 14.4, 10.2. That's pretty close. I think in terms of production, it's hard to argue that Ayton's pendulum didn't swing towards the worst case scenario. But I think I was wrong in an important way. One of the ways that I said that this sort of the struggles would manifest was that DA would, like the soft stuff would hurt him. His position on the team, the pecking order, the number of shots, some stuff I cut out there because I edit those to get him down to not be a full 8-minute segment or whatever that I recorded back in September. Like that I mentioned, it's like you're going to get more Scoot Henderson shots and you're getting more Shaedon Sharpe and more Denny Avdia and you're going to get, just like there's going to be more mouths to feed on offense in general and like figuring out how that works. And because Ayton is reliant on other players to like set up his shots, right? He's not a shot creator. He's a play finisher. I think that's just undeniable at this point in his career. He's just not going to be that. He's reliant on his teammates. And if his teammates are going to get theirs or he's just getting a smaller slice of the pie, I thought that would bother him. And I thought maybe by drafting a rookie center, 7th overall, and as Ayton realized, he's clock's ticking. He was extension eligible since July of last year, right? And they drafted a center 7th overall. And I thought there was a world in which Ayton, the soft stuff would get to Ayton, right? And maybe you could argue that they did early, right? And that's why it took him, 25 games to get going last season. But I think outwardly, Deandre Ayton was a very, very, very good teammate. A very, very good teammate. If he struggled this season, I wouldn't point to the soft stuff. There was no outward anxiety about his position or place on the team or future. When Deandre Ayton spoke in public and the few times when I would see him in the locker room and just like kind of off the cuff, this wasn't a guy pouting or disappointed or frustrated. This was someone who maintained pretty positive spirits and was like a kind of a rah-rah guy in a way that I don't think he was at all in his first season with Blazers. And he was a freaking huge Donovan Klingan fan. He was as outwardly and vocally supportive of Donovan Klingan's growth, of Donovan Klingan's minutes, of Donovan Klingan's success as anyone on the roster. Nobody celebrated DC like DA. So while I do think Deandre Ayton swung towards the worst case scenario, I don't think he swung towards the worst case scenario for the reasons that I was worried about. That is a take I think that is a little bit, I think it's telling. because I think there is part of talking about Deandre Ayton is you want to assign some meaning to the way he plays. Oh, he doesn't play hard because he's all worried about, he only cares about these things. And he's when he doesn't get his shots, he's going to be a little baby, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that is the case, right? Maybe we saw that early. But I would say that some of his struggles are more about basketball than they are about like being a human with these, impossible to overcome human emotions that we all deal with, right? That doesn't make him unique. I got those too. But I think it's notable that Deandre Ayton, while he ended up in the worst case scenario, he ended up there for the reasons that I would have highlighted and said, obviously this is why he's going to have a bad year. I don't think that, I don't read that as what happened. I read it as basketball stuff is what happened. He just never fit into the plan. And then when he started to fit into the plan, he got hurt. So what do you do with DA? Talented offensive player, albeit it's one that has a very specific kind of niche thing that he does. He aces mid-range jumpers, right? Can be a pretty good defensive player, but probably hasn't been a very good defensive player for very long stretches, right? I don't think we've seen like a significantly good long stretches of good defense from DA. What do you do with him? Let's talk about that. To close the show, this is a big question mark for the Blazers, not only this summer where the question mark gets highlighted and we will scream about it a bunch, but if they don't make a decision, it gets even dicier. The way I see it, there are three choices. Let's talk about those choices in that third segment. Join me there. Before we get there, though, I want to tell you about Open Phone. It could be a solution if you're running a business, because you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need. Maybe you need a plumber or some sort of service provider. If the first person didn't answer when you're calling them, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. And that's why your business and you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Phone and computer, I would argue. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. Like I said, it's a shared inbox, so you can share with your team, and any of your crew can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Plus, you got an AI agent that handles all your after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. Openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. What do you do with a problem like DA? The way I see it, there are three choices. First of all, so let's set the stage. Deandre Ayton has been extension eligible since last July. If the Blazers wanted to make him part of the long-term future, they certainly could have. But coming off his first season in Portland, boy howdy did he not earned a contract extension. I think you'd be hard-pressed to say now it would make sense to sign Deandre Ayton to a contract extension, unless he's willing to take a significant pay cut. And if I'm Deandre Ayton, why the heck would I be talking about pay cuts? I want to play my way into the money, baby. He's entering the final year of his 25% max that he signed back in 2022. An offer sheet he signed with the Indiana Pacers, eventually matched by the Suns, who were no longer interested in being in the Deandre Ayton business, but kind of backed themselves into being in the Deandre Ayton business. And for their troubles, they got to waive Keon Johnson, waive Nazir Little, and trade Yusuf Nurkic and a couple picks for Nick Richards. And also give up Toumani Camara. Whoops. That was a 4-year, $133 million contract. Ayton's entering the final year of his deal. $35.5 million he'll earn this year, and then he will enter unrestricted free agency, so there won't be no matching by some team holding you hostage in the summer of 2026. So the way I see it, there are three options. The Blazers can re-sign Deandre Ayton, step one. I doubt he would take a serious pay cut. Like, I think Deandre Ayton making like $15 million a year is awesome player, like very useful and helpful, and you're just like, you're not beholden to playing him 35 minutes because you're not that invested in him, blah, blah. It's like, it changes the calculation. But if I'm DA and I'm making, if someone's asking me to take a $20 million pay cut, it's going to be a new employer. I'm certainly not going, like, it's like, if the team says, hey, here's the offer, it starts at the mid-level exception for $14.5 million. Like, I'll just go from my reasoning. If a team wants to commit to you long term, but part of that commitment is having you take like a more than 50% pay cut, kick rocks. You can go get a 50% pay cut somewhere else, right? So I can't see that happening. Maybe he wants to re-sign at the same level. Say like he won't get a raise because like a max contract now, like a 25% max now is like something like $40-some million, right? The cap has risen a bunch. He's not going to get that, right? He's not going to get back to the 25% max. He's just not that player. You pay guys for what they can be coming off the rookie deal. He's not that. So he's not going to get a raise. But is he going to get good starter money, right? Is he going to get big time starter money? And big time starter money is in that like 20% of the cap. So you're talking about $30 million, right? Like that's about what a starter is going to make in the modern NBA, which is wild to think about, but we'll have to start talking percentage of the cap otherwise. Does it make sense for the Blazers to sign Deandre Ayton with as good as Donovan Klingan looked to like kind of a big money contract, a starter money entering next season? I don't think you can look at Donovan Klingan and think like, yeah, he's definitely the dude and he's ready for all this big minutes and stuff. I think you could look at him and say he's going to be a starter in the NBA. He's already pretty good and he's basically awful on offense. If he got just back to like normal below average on offense, boy, would he be a positively impactful player. But there is reason to have concern about a giant person who's 21 and hasn't played big minutes in the NBA. You're going to want depth behind Donovan Klingan regardless, period. You're going to want center depth behind him, period. But signing DA wouldn't be center depth behind him. It would be something like big money next to him. And it would be big money next to him knowing that, somewhere in the future down the line, everything works out. You're going to have to pay Kamara and Avdia and Scoot and Shea and like, right? Like it doesn't make sense. I'm having trouble seeing that one make sense, but we'll revisit that one in a moment. Step 2 is trade him. I don't think at his price tag, $35.5 million over the last year and a half, that Ayton was particularly tradable, right? Just because, he wasn't very good in his final season with the Suns, and he was really struggled in his first season in Portland. He's played just 95 of possible 164 games to begin his Blazers career. Like, he missed more than half of the season this year. Availability has been a big deal for him, and DA was honest about he wants to get healthy and play and prove to the Blazers that he can like stay on the court. That's meaningful to him. So like, I don't think he has been particularly tradable, but as an expiring contract, he becomes more tradable, right? But the best way to get value from expiring contracts is to take back bad money. Well, and by bad money, I mean like, say someone else has a long-term contract that they, multi-year deal, and as opposed to one that expires in the summer of 2026, they have one that either goes into the summer of 2027 or summer of 2028. And they say, if you'll take this contract, this multi-year deal off of our hands, we'll pay you either with a young player or with a draft pick to like sort of facilitate that, right? That's the best way to maximize the value of expirings. Otherwise, expiring contracts typically don't have value. Like if you don't want to trade them for that type of thing, because the other team is taking on some risk. That player will enter unrestricted free agency and walk. Like they won't be able to keep him, right? True free agency that Ayton would find himself. Obviously, you're trading for your bird rights, and kind of what you end up trading for with expiring contracts is the right to pay the player that you're trading for. That doesn't have a ton of appeal in and of itself. But so I would say the best use of expirings doesn't really fit the Blazers' MO. That's not really how they've operated. They've not been a take on bad money and absorb draft assets. They haven't valued draft assets. They've actually valued players, right? Like think about Rob Williams and Malcolm Brogdon and Denny Avdia, and like they have not valued expiring money. They have not valued contracts and trades. They've typically tried to find guys, right? That has been their MO. So I don't necessarily think trading, while it could happen, I don't think the sort of maximum use of Ayton's trade value is the way that the front office has operated. Also, I think you could make a case that the Blazers are in this position where they're going to have to pay Toumani Camara in the summer of 2027 and eventually Denny Avdia, and along with the young guards, if they pop or whatever. But like, taking on bad money as they try to get good, like they're going to try to have more success talk about whether they should try to get good and what that means at a future show. But like, if as they're trying to get better and they're trying to like build and be competitive, the bad money is much more prohibitive, much more painful than for teams that are like actively trying to be bad, right? The cycle and the timing is not great for them to take on money. So that's step two. The final option is let him walk. Those are the three choices. You re-sign him, you trade him, or you don't do anything with him and you let him walk in free agency. I think there is a tendency for sort of the GM brain out here, and I'm certainly a victim of this. I freaking do this show every day, where it's like you have to maximize every asset. You can't let blah blah. I think there's a world in which the trades aren't particularly palatable for what the Blazers want to accomplish, and that letting Deandre Ayton walk in the summer of 2026, just like you get to the end of the season, give him a handshake and thank him for his services and let him go get a job somewhere else, that could be potentially the most palatable way and maybe the most beneficial way to deal with Ayton's future. And part of that is, let me revisit number one. The challenge with expirings, and this is true of Anfernee Simons as well, is that you kind of, if you don't make a deal, you can kind of back yourself into a position where you feel compelled to have to re-sign someone, right? Because you don't want to lose the asset. I feel like that's what happened with Jeremy Grant. I do not think it had anything to do with Damian Lillard. People who think that, I don't think pay close attention to how it actually works, but or at least the timeline of that particular event. But I think they backed themselves in a position where they didn't want to lose, quote unquote, the asset. And I think you can get into a situation where you don't want to lose DeAndre Ayton for nothing, so you end up re-signing him. And backing yourself into a position where you re-sign Ayton seems like the messiest of these things. I think he's very unlikely to sign a contract extension this summer. Just like, why would he, coming off the 2 years that he had from his point of view and also the Blazers' point of view? But there is a world in which where they don't trade him, and then you get into this let him walk re-sign period in free agency of 2026. And I think that's messy because I don't think he'll take a huge pay cut, but maybe you could work the market and say, it isn't out there for you. The money's not out there for you. Come on back. Take our $18 million a year. Come on back. We'd love to have you. We shall see how that all plays out. The real truth is that, and I'll close here as I run a little bit long, I think the Blazers did draft DeAndre Ayton's replacement in Donovan Klingan. Part of it is, when are they ready to admit that and commit to that and do all of those things? And when is Donovan Klingan ready to seize that? It might not be this year. There's a pretty good chance that DeAndre Ayton is still a lot better than Klingan. Although I think at the end of the year, Klingan was pretty darn good. So a lot better would be an overstatement. But certainly at the beginning of Klingan's rookie year, he struggled. Like even when DA was bad, he was better than him in the early part of the season. But I think Kling kind of found his way at the end of the year. And if he builds on that, then it's like, when do you commit? Because at some point you do. But even when you do, you still need that. You still need another center. You still probably need one, if not two more viable centers. That is going to be valuable. The league is big. Like, you're going to need center depth. Protecting the rim is incredibly important, particularly if you're going to play this pressure defense on the outside. Having a rim protector behind that pressure defense is important. That's how the whole thing's going to work. So I think the timing of, the Blazers have their center of the future, but the timing of when they make the center of the future, the center of the present, and how they handle that interim when he's maybe not ready to be the center of the present, but is clearly, oh, hey, look, Donovan Klingan can play 24 minutes, but you still have another 24 minutes that you desperately need at center. How they handle that, I think, is fascinating. There is a world in which DeAndre Ayton is back and is a long-term part of the future. I think that is the least likely of the scenarios. But how they handle his short-term, whether they trade him this summer, which I think is in some ways should be a priority, but we'll see, or they try to make that move at the trade deadline and maybe get some expiring, get paid back for sending an expiring contract for a playoff run, we shall see. I think it's an interesting run, and hopefully the Ayton that has had, brief spurts, about 25 games this first season and 8 games this season of being really good, you can have more of the really good, because mostly we've seen kind of meh with some moments, and meh with some moments is not a solution for anyone, DA included. That is going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow's show will be the last one before the draft. Actually, we'll have 2 more before the draft lottery. Who am I talking about? It's on Monday afternoon. we'll talk draft workouts. The Blazers held one draft workout on Tuesday. They're going to hold another one on Thursday. We'll talk about those things and look ahead to some draft stuff as we enter the final couple shows before the lottery. I appreciate you listening. Tell your friends about the program 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts. If you missed it yesterday, Oregon's Secretary of State, Tobias Reed, was on the program. Go back and listen to that one. Also tell your friends about that. Keep telling some other friends. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.